Tapping in this week with Elias Sbiet from North Pole Hoops and the National Preparatory Association. Elias was named one of the top 20 most powerful voices, influential people in basketball and Canadian basketball, and it was an honor to have him on. He's someone who's built culture and built infrastructure for the sport for young people to be able to get another opportunity at the next level, whether that's collegiately or in the professional ranks. For me personally, a huge fan of the man. I love the way that he is portraying himself as a role model. He is being a role model for the youth. And also, in addition, how he just thinks about the methodology of creating an identity of a player. That's a lot of what we talked about. What are the winning characteristics of a player? What are the mentalities you need to adapt? How do things like social media, social relationships play into that? A skill development side, coaches and recruits, what do they need to see? So I love this conversation. We kept it to an hour. It was our first call-in. It went beautifully. Thank you for your time and enjoy this podcast. Elias, thank you for joining me from Toronto, our first call-in. Super excited to have you here. Wish you were on the West Coast with us, but you will be here soon, I'm sure, doing your national circuits and all that. Thank you for joining us, my man.
Pleasure to be on, man. Good reconnecting with you. We know we've been trying to set this up for some time, and schedules work the way they do, but it's good to be here.
Yes, they do. Busy people. So let's trim the fat. Let's jump right into it, man. A lot of people know you as the founder of North Pole Hoops. Can you just get a little bit into the ethos of that, what that actually means? I know public perception is one thing, and I know what it actually means to the founder is another thing.
For sure. Everything started up with my brother and I, both co-founders. Just a lack of opportunities where it all got started. Trying to find a scope, a platform that allows Canadian talent to be recognized globally, scholarship opportunities to open up, and that's really how this all got going. Just through a lack of opportunity and a void in an industry, a non-existent industry, if you will, at that time. We're talking 15 years ago, and now here we are today. Canadian basketball is booming, bigger than ever, and yeah, that's pretty much the origin right there.
Yeah, talk about gratification. I was just listening to an interview with you on CBC and talking about, this is only the beginning when Toronto won the championship last year. And I don't think, maybe you can provide some context around when you're creating, for instance, international sports like a soccer or football or baseball, whatever it may be, that there's already like infrastructure there. Those are already viable businesses. There's already fanship there. There's already developed talent there. You're coming into, I don't know if this is analogous, but it's almost like if I was to try to start an ecosystem around cricket in Canada today, like basketball was unknown. It was so far down the list, it wasn't even funny. So what you've kind of done, in my interpretation of it, is literally create an ecosystem, both from a business standpoint and from a player development standpoint. Did you see this all the way through, 15 years ago, day one? What was the vision at that point? Because this sport wasn't even heard of in this country.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Hockey has long been the head honcho in Canada, and when we were coming up, as I mentioned earlier, through that lack of opportunity and traveling to the States often to visit my cousins in Michigan, they had a system. They had a system in place, an infrastructure, if you will, where college coaches were making their way into high school games. High school games there had upwards of 1,000 people watching, and to us that was absurd. To us in Mississauga at that time, you'd be lucky to get 20 people in. Your mom, your dad, and your closest, your siblings, maybe, and a couple classmates. Yeah. So moving into the way things got cracking here in Canada, where do I begin? You start with how do you get college coaches in the building? That's first and foremost. It's a huge investment. First, from myself and my brother, just traveling to the U.S. and pumping out money at that time, working construction, working 3 jobs to ensure that we have the capital to keep this thing going and to get kids recognized. In terms of the structure was kind of set in stone. And then there was a vision a manifestation, if you will, 10 years ago, and pieces just kept getting added naturally through the way the industry developed and through the way we molded into it. So, I mean, for us at the lowest levels, at the foundation level, you have the showcase circuit, which is used to first identify all the talent across Canada. And the entire system is geared towards getting them to the highest levels, which is, playing professionally. In between those levels, things kind of just happen naturally based off of a need. So, for example, we own and operate the National Preparatory Association as well. That's a nationwide league of prep schools from across Canada that participate for a national championship. That's something I'm assuming we'll talk about a little bit later. But that is a piece that we didn't have in mind. We didn't envision prior to, but it was a need and a want from the people at large. So it was kind of, for the people, by the people. But I mean, it all started with just showcase circuit, tournaments, different sorts of events, and then piece by piece, kind of just as the industry molded, we figured out what is absolutely necessary. For example, Canada's only NCAA certified tournament. That is something that we run in July as well. That just kind of happened. That happened because the dollar was going up so high.
Right.
We were going to the States and spending $1.33 per dollar. And it made no sense. So we said, wait a minute, we have this huge clientele through our scouting service. Why don't we just invite the college coaches into Canada?
Yeah.
They got the funds, they got the budgets to do that kind of travel. If they're traveling to Lithuania, Australia, and elsewhere, why wouldn't they just come across the border? So yeah, things kind of just flowed naturally. But the vision started 10 years ago. The foundation was laid 10 years ago, and it's just been building blocks from there.
So that's from a structural standpoint and how you kind of built it up. That's beautiful. Now the culture we experience now, I mean, like ball is life wasn't even a phrase back there. I mean, I remember when those guys from Ball is Life were just like hopping around with camcorders looking stupid on the baseline, and now that's maybe the most common thing to do in gyms. And maybe you can speak a little bit to how, North Pole Hoops and you yourself specifically has built the actual culture around the sport of basketball, because as much as it's, you're putting a ball through a hoop, it's a way of life. It's a moment of hope for a lot of kids. And you've now manifested and built and structurally created culture in some way. And people try to fabricate culture all the time, and it's really tough. How the hell did you fabricate or organically grow this, abundant culture that now exists around the sport in Canada?
I think that's a loaded question. Culture is any business. The internal culture, I think, is one that ends up making it into the mainstream market. For us, it's you get what you put in. Everything is earned. That's the internal culture, because starting off as a young business, you don't have a bankroll for payroll, for example.
Right.
But the internal members of the team recognize that this is brand new, and it is going to grow, and it does have potential to grow. But you got to invest first into yourself, and that is the same culture that we push towards the kids that come to our camp and the parents that come in for consultations with regards to recruiting. And it's through the subliminal messages that are in our marketing, things like Game Speaks.
Right.
What does that really mean? Well, Game Speaks means that when you're on the floor, everything that you show should do the talking. All the hoopla, the tweets, and all that other stuff. It doesn't matter. You posting of yourself in the gym, getting up shots, and it's about what you do in secret. So I think for any culture in a business, it's important that it's developed internally first and then pushed outwards. So I mean, in a grand scheme, taking this methodology and moving it across Canada, I think it was pushed through our camps. That's what helped us the most. I don't think that it's possible without strategic pieces to the puzzle. And what I mean by that is personnel who absolutely holistically believe that this is the way that it's going to be, that it's all about investment into the self first, understanding what the culture of the business is internally, and then being able to push it outward.
Yeah, I mean, culture isn't isn't necessarily a list of words on a wall, but it's a a list of actions throughout the day, or actions throughout the week, actions throughout the month. Right? It's felt. It's felt in a very specific way. You said earlier that you invest in yourself first, and as a player, that's easy to understand, or as anyone that's in the athletic realm, that's easy to understand. You're working your fundamentals, you're working on your pivots, whatever it may be. You're working on your shot form, or you're working on your mental game and your meditation and your focus. That's investing in yourself. In a business sense, it becomes more complicated. Well, I'm like, I need to get money in the door. I need to develop my people. I need to develop myself. I need to understand my market better. When you talk about MPH, in the early days, what does investing in yourself as a business or as a business owner actually look like?
What does investing in yourself as a business? Okay, that's a great question as well. I think sacrifice is the biggest thing. That's what investing into yourself is like, putting personal relationships on hold that you really, really want to push, but are unable to because of the differences socially.
Right.
Investing into yourself monetarily, if that means, back in the day, traveling to Kansas, traveling to Kentucky, having to sleep in the car, having to shower at gyms,
Yeah.
and
YMCA life.
not being able to afford hotels at the time, all that kind of stuff. And those are things that no business person, I think, should be ashamed of. They should put that out in the open, because every business has a beginning, and that type of initial sacrifice investment is most necessary if anything is going to thrive. And if, to your earlier question, if you are going to truly build a concrete foundation for that culture, the people that come after you need to know that, hey, if this is the leader that I'm going to follow, is he just talking the talk, or has he walked it as well?
Right.
And in our case, we've had to do that. We've had to sacrifice immensely, whether that's up until late 20s, sharing a room with our co-founder and partner in this business and brother, Tarek, and building one of the rooms into an office, or not paying yourself, not putting yourself on salary for quite some time. All that stuff is absolutely necessary. And I think that once the pieces that are in your business as employees and contractors and other staff recognize that leadership is making those sacrifices, then everything kind of falls in line from there.
Right. Yeah. It's very easy to see lead by example, right? I mean, in some forms, that's the best form of leadership, right? I mean, and especially as humans, we learn by seeing others do. I mean, we're just evolved monkeys, my friend, right? Like, it's like, if I see him do that, okay, that's the way to win. Let me emulate that, or I can now believe in that, right? Seeing is believing.
and for basketball context and reference, just look at Kobe Bryant with LA.
Oh yeah.
Look at the type of work ethic he had. When he was playing on the Lakers, he'd be the first one in the gym, the last one out. And then other people that came on, rookies that came in, saw that, wait a minute, this guy's at the top of the game already. He's one of the greatest of all time, yet he puts in this ridiculous amount of effort. And even till this day, those 12-hour days are still required here at North Pole Hoops. And, just from a basketball context perspective, if Kobe's doing that, if the elite of the elite are doing that, then what should everybody else be doing?
Yeah, see, that's so interesting. Kobe, Mike, LBJ, whatever it may be, draw whatever reference you want, or even if you want to go to the business world, like, the Phil Knights, the Elons, or whatever it may be, they all exhibit that work ethic. Now, here in 2020, we have this like wave of health and wellness and all this type of stuff. We see anxiety on the rise, and people are, their health is being put to a detriment. And so, as much as like I'm someone who's like essentially subscribed to that exact philosophy you're talking about their entire life, I'm kind of taking a step back and looking at it and be like, okay, how do I do this, but make sure it's sustainable, and B, my level of purpose and fulfillment is sustained over that same amount of time. So how do you strike a balance if that time is indeed required, which it is undoubtedly? I mean, that just gives you a shot. That doesn't guarantee success. It just gives you a chance to open the door. How do you strike a balance between that level of work ethic and at the same time making sure, the health and the wellness, whether that's mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever it is? How do you strike that balance as someone that works their ass off the way that you do?
Yeah, I think for me, I learned the hard way for how to strike that balance.
Right.
It wasn't until I developed sciatica,
Mm,
which has a lot to do with nerve endings and kind of clinching of a certain muscle group. And for me, it ran from my lower back down to my leg, and I literally could not move a muscle.
damn.
And I could not get out of bed. I could not turn. And that came from the amount of travel that I was doing at that time. It was flight to hotel, hotel to gym, gym to car, so on and so forth. And it was nonstop for a very long time, for several months. And that eventually caught up.
Right.
And once that did, that's for me what kind of made me realize that, okay, this is it. Like, yes, you have to stick to your vision, yes, you have to stick to your values, but there has to be, something's got to give.
Right.
And it took a special person to kind of come into my life to make me recognize that.
Yeah.
So for a lot of people, I think, and especially for ultra competitive people, it takes that kind of punch in the face
Yeah.
before you recognize it, because you feel like you can work forever.
Yeah.
And that you're invincible at times, and you got this, all these endorphins and all this energy pumping through your blood, but eventually you hit a wall. So for me, I can only speak for myself. I know everybody's different, but for me, it took that happening and certain relationships being broken and pushing certain people away before I realized that, hey, this is not right. I need a balance. I need to get back into the gym. I need to spend my energy here. I need to, balance the testosterone levels.
Yeah.
All that.
Yeah. That's a big piece, man. That's a really big piece. I think one of the lessons I've learned is like, it's, if we get paid on the quality of decisions we make, right? As business people, as coaches, as scouts, essentially, like, the person that brought Pascal Siakam in is getting paid, and the people that invest their time and energy into certain people or certain directions, like, it's based on the quality of decision you make. And I think if you're overworking yourself and you're exhausted or burnt out, again, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it may be, you're not in a position to make great decisions, period. Like for me, I work in the wealth management space. My job is to make decisions. And so it's like, I need to, number one, get my physical self in check. I need to make sure my hormone levels are straight. I need to make sure that I'm getting sweats in. I need to make sure that I'm breathing, make sure that I'm meditating, make sure that I'm like the right foods are in my body so I can fuel myself the right way. Because that's baseline. It's like trying to perform as an athlete, trying to play a game, 2 games in a row, whatever it may be, without drinking water, or playing games, drinking just Gatorade. It's just not gonna fuel you. It's baseline. There is nothing past that if you can't figure that out. And you need to work 12 hours, 14 hours, cool. How do you actually sustain that? How can you make that healthy, and how can you make that work for you in a way that is going to actually reap rewards? Because it's not time in, it's quality of time. This is something we preach as coaches all the time. Are they goofy shots? Are they half court shots? Or are they game shots? Are they game speed? Where are you visualizing while you're taking those shots, right? Et cetera, et cetera.
For sure.
I'd love if you could speak a little bit to what is, just to take a step back in terms of your internal team, your internal culture, because you develop players all the time, you develop people all the time, and a lot of coaches and scouts and players are listening to this right now. How do you build your internal team? What qualities are you looking for? What qualities are you trying to build? How do you make that work for you, for your internal team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it requires a narrative, And for us, our business is very much surrounded around the makings of the San Antonio Spurs and some of the characteristics that they have. And I'll just kind of look up on the wall here. You see some of the personality traits. This is our championship wall. So
Yes,
as soon
sir.
as you walk into the office, this is the first thing you see. Great energy, character, personnel, leadership, people with composure, being able to manage the ego. I think that is one of the ultimate ways for businesses to thrive. We're a people business, no matter which way you slice it. Whether it's dealing with clients, whether it's dealing with staff, whoever the case may be. And the biggest thing, if you can't manage your ego and can't come to an understanding of putting others first, business is not going to fly.
Yep.
Because word of mouth travels extremely, extremely quickly. So I think, building a narrative and kind of a comparison for something that already exists, that is already successful, and kind of simulating that and showing how there's cross-reference there is what ultimately allows people to buy in. It's so hard to get buy-in, especially from young people. Everyone who's reaching out to us now and wants to get involved in basketball because it's a sport that's blowing up. There's people coming out of college and they kind of got their hand out like, where's mine?
Yeah.
You just came out of college. You got no experience. What do I owe you?
Right.
And that goes to the level of entitlement in today's modern day society. That is something that just doesn't fly. It doesn't fly in basketball. It doesn't fly in business. It doesn't fly in corporate structure. It doesn't fly in any type of team setting. So again, it goes back to the ego, right?
Right.
Having that son of a gun in check, that will take you far.
Yeah. So there's one thing in principle, it's one thing in philosophy, and one thing to strategize about that. Okay, listen, get your ego in check, get other people's around you ego in check. But you ever dealt with a super egotistical person? There's a lot of successful people that are super egotistical or whatever it may be. How do you even approach that situation? I mean, maybe you're hiring someone, or maybe it's a player that's really got the juice. Having those conversations as a man is tough.
No doubt. So in my line of business, you're dealing with a lot of elite level players, different personalities, and I think that people with those levels of egos need to be checked. They need to be checked by a voice that they respect, one that is equally as gifted or equally as talented in their own craft. It doesn't have to be the same craft. But I think that's the biggest thing. You got to be able to check them in a way that is not confrontational.
Right.
Because if it's an aggressive confrontational manner, then defense goes up, walls go up.
Yeah.
And forget trying to get to them then.
Yeah.
So it's really about your approach. That's really it, man.
Intuitive, I'm sure, a lot as well. Experience, right?
For sure.
Dealing with that, yeah. So it's a nice little segue into, we'll flip that around and go, all right, for the players listening, when it comes to how you present yourself in a room, when it comes to how you present yourself on the court, when it comes to how your interaction with the players or just the individuals around you, what's the narrative that you wish, because you spoke about narratives earlier, that you kind of would hope young elite players take in their own internal dialogue as it pertains to that?
Okay, so deep. That's a deep one. We got this 3-tier system. You have it's all regarding identity. When you're building a narrative for yourself as a player, it essentially is your identity. And our system is your identity as a prospect, your identity as a student as the core, and your identity amongst your peers. In all of those tiers, we list out all of the possible traits in those tiers. Now, when I'm at camp and I ask the question, how many of you are trying to go pro? How many of you are trying to, receive a Division I NCAA scholarship?
All the hands go up.
You can imagine every single hand goes up, every single one.
Right.
Now, at the end of camp, the same question is slightly altered, and it's how many of you think that you are en route to receiving a Division I scholarship or playing professionally? And guess how many hands go up?
How many?
4, 6 tops, maybe 10 at some of the best camps, but that's out of 150 people.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is they've done their homework. On day one, they take home that 3-tier system, which is a narrative of their identity, and they are able to self-evaluate. So once you've self-evaluated and you've seen, wait a minute, I got flaws here, here, and here on the prospect chart.
Right.
As a student, I haven't even written my SAT test. I haven't even written a practice test. Wait a minute, I'm flunking in math.
Yeah.
This, that, and the other. Oh, attendance. I've been skipping classes. Then there's an awakening, right? Or amongst your peers. Amongst your peers, it's no longer a matter of me and you face to face or in person. Your identity amongst your peers means a lot more than that. It means who you present yourself to be on social media. Nothing is real on social media. You haven't seen a single person on social media that has what's the best words to use here? A depressed persona, or something that's, you know what I'm talking about. You know where I'm getting at.
Yeah, I know you're feeling.
But what's going on behind those scenes, right? There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of testing. There's a lot of kids that will post a picture, not get enough likes, remove it.
Right.
There's a lot of kids that spend hours upon hours on social media, and through that, they don't even know that it's happening, but they're actually losing confidence because they're looking at other people's pages and the amount of followers and the amount of likes, and they feel like, oh, I need some of that too. So they lose sense of identity. And when you lose sense of identity, you don't have a narrative. You don't know where your story begins and where it ends. So what we try to empower and encourage kids to do is self-evaluate first. List your goal. What is your main target here? What are you trying to do ultimately? From there, work backwards. What's the checklist that is involved in reaching that goal? And once they've seen it for themselves and they can look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm not even close, then now you have a narrative.
Damn.
Now you control where that story goes.
Right. So much to go off of that. Maybe a quick one here is, how do you, in 2020, how do you think these kids, these players, either just young people in general, and when I say young, I mean anyone under 30 really, how do you think they should interact with this new digital medium of social? Because it's integrated into the fabric of our culture and our lives, but there's negative reasons and there's positive reasons. I can lose my own narrative if I don't use it correctly. How should I even approach that if I'm a player?
If you're a player specifically,
sure.
I'm absolutely limiting. I'm placing a legit limit on my phone as to how much time is spent on there. And there's a lot of ways to figure out. Like, for example, I'm forced to creep some players' pages in order to get an understanding of who they are. And, in our player profile system, while I'm talking, I'll pull up a player profile to give you an example. In a profile, you can see the amount of posts that a player has.
Wow.
If they have a few thousand posts and a lot of them are selfie oriented, you know exactly what's going on in that head. You know how self-conscious they are. You know how it shows me it's a lack of character.
Yeah.
It's look at me, I need attention. If they, on the, I forgot what it's called when you go to the pages where you see what everyone else is liking.
Right.
Not your likes, when you see what everyone else is liking.
Everyone's activity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That page. That kind of tells you, okay, how much time are they spending on here? What's important to them?
Right.
And then you break down, okay, wait a minute. I got 24 hours in a day. If I got 24 hours in a day, and Princeton and Harvard studies are telling us that kids are between the ages of 13 and 17, 18 are spending 4 hours a day, 3 to 4 hours a day on social media.
Yeah.
How on fucking earth is it possible that someone who's spending 4 hours a day on social media is going to reach this significant milestone of a scholarship opportunity?
Right.
One of the most limited things. It's essentially a jackpot. It's a lottery of sorts.
Absolutely.
Right. And then the pros. That's a whole nother
lottery. Yeah.
So I mean, it really is simply impossible for them to get to that level if their activity level is so high. So first and foremost, and going back to your original question, I'm limiting the amount of time that is spent on social media. iPhones have it, Androids have it. You can set a time limit. You can set an alarm that tells you I'm spending too much time, or like this is it, like 15 minutes a day tops.
Yeah,
that's the route that I'm taking. And
that's crazy for most kids. Like 15 minutes. That's like 2 videos or whatever it is. Like, what? I can't do that. How many profiles can I creep in 15 minutes? This is not enough. But to that point, it's like, well, prioritize what's really important in life. Time is your most scarce resource. Once it's spent, you never get it back. And, consuming is not the way to spend your time in order to lead a fulfilled life, or in order to lead a high level life, a period. And I think that's discovered now that we've had social for a little while. So I want to touch back a little bit on your earlier point. You said you have, you kind of divide player identity into 3 silos, and you kind of think about, okay, well, what characteristics do you need in each in order for you to be a viable option for a university or for a professional club to look at you? What is the winning formula? What should I be what are the key components of a winning formula for a player to be looked at, whether it's, again, school or professional club? Is there one, or does it vary for every person?
I think it varies at different stages. There's a lot of players that maximize on their potential at a very early age, and then there's late bloomers. Yeah, so after you've identified the physical traits and what that player could project, you're going into his bag, his skill set. If you're looking at a point guard, you're thinking elite ball handler, you're thinking dagger 3-point shooter. He's got to be able to knock it down from 3 if given space. He's got to have the intangibles as well as the tangibles. He's got to have the vocal ability to lead and the respect level from his peers to actually listen to him.
Right.
If you're looking at forwards, they need to be very hybrid in today's game. They need to be able to bang down low in the post a little bit, stretch the floor and shoot the 3, put it on the deck and create their own offense.
Right.
Then you move into the educational side, SAT scores, GPAs, so on and so forth. You move on to the peer side. You do your homework. Interviewing teachers and parents and peers of that person, studying their social media pages, and seeing exactly what is the character makeup of this person. The reason why is because back in the day, I was working with the University of Oklahoma. This is probably like 10 years ago. I was first getting involved in scouting recruiting, and there was a player that in the first quote unquote silo, if you will, as an athlete, no doubt about it, potential NBA player.
Right.
As a student and identity, student and identity amongst their peers, they were weak. But all I saw and all I knew was what I saw on the court. So I made a call to the University of Oklahoma. They had offered him a scholarship based on the feedback that I gave him. And he accepted that scholarship. And a couple of weeks later, let's just say there was some content that was on his page that it wouldn't fly on any university level. And that person becomes a direct representation of that university once they've accepted a scholarship. So that was revoked.
Right.
And that's why that final tier, that character, that peer standpoint is so important.
Totally, man. Yeah, it's everything. And the other thing too is when you become part of the alma mater at a university or even at a professional club or an organization, whatever, you become someone that worked at Facebook, or someone that worked at MPH. And as someone who worked at MPH, or someone that played for Oklahoma or whatever it may be, you're representing that organization for the rest of your life, because that means at some point that organization signed off on you. And that means a lot about that organization, right? That's why you have to be so careful hiring. It's everything. Sure. People are the culture. People are the company. People are the narratives in themselves. I mean, just, you can't stress the importance of it enough. So being able to identify and why you're such a valuable person is being able to identify the right people for the right circumstances, and having the right systems in place to do that is maybe the most ubiquitous skill you can use, along with communication and leadership in this life. And it's so important. Being able to be a good judge of character is everything.
For sure.
So, all right. So there's the silos a little bit. Now, as someone who has, is essentially in control of the basketball infrastructure for, a large part. I mean, yes, there's the schools and the clubs and the universities, et cetera, but you play a huge part in now the ecosystem that you've built. So in your relationship with these players, you're trying to build out the right characteristics, as you earlier said earlier. What are you trying to add? What is the missing piece in these young people's minds? What are you trying to build in their story that you think they should be cognizant or aware of?
So the main thing is, I think everyone that we've dealt with so far, with the exception of Jamal Murray, RJ Barrett, maybe Nikhil Alexander-Walker, Shea, the upper echelon. The levels below that, and then the levels below the next level, everyone is afraid of the self. And here's what I mean by that. We are very easily adapting and tied into what already exists, what already is put out there. What's everybody else doing? I'm going to follow that. We are sheep. There's and this age of social media and lack of discipline and lack of confidence is further engaging that. And I think that's the number one thing that we're trying to push is, and this is going to sound very cliche, but don't be afraid to be the self. These guys just walked in with an pass that over here. Pass that over here. We're gonna interrupt here.
I love it.
Whoa. Whoa. Check this out. Check this out.
Damn.
That's the national championship belt. So one of the kids this year is going to be one of the teams, I should say, is walking away with this national championship belt.
Beautiful.
Now, going back to what we were talking about, so building their identity is first and foremost. If you don't have, this is why. When you get to the NBA level, as an example, a rookie gets onto the team. He's making $1.7 million a year. A vet who's just re-signed for 5 years is making $23 million a year. They go out to the club. They go out shopping together. Teammates do that stuff. They go out and eat and have a certain lifestyle and get certain jewelry. If the one that's making 1.7 or 1.3 a year is trying to live the same life as the dude that's making 22 a year, there's no chance in hell that money lasts.
Yeah.
And this goes back to self-identity and building the self and being okay with the self, because you can't play copycat your whole life. Everybody is different. Everybody has a different path to go on before they reach that ultimate goal. Now, there are guys like Dwight Powell, who I hope is going to recover very quickly, who started off as one of the lower end paid players, and then got a contract extension, got redeveloped with Dallas, and moved on to make more money. But it takes a super mature guy to ensure that they're living a certain lifestyle and are okay with who they are.
Yeah, see that through. So, but then that raises the question of, well, how do I craft that identity? I mean, how do I know who I am as a player? Like, For instance, we're in an ecosystem where, yeah, coaches are looking for knockdown 3-point shooters. They're looking for people that think a certain way, that act a certain way. And as much as that's all valid, okay, so I need these characteristics, but within those characteristics, how do I still be me? How do I find out what that is?
This goes back to what we were talking about earlier, man. How do you know? How do you know who you truly are if you've been practicing to just do what everybody else does your whole life? You don't until you've sat down with yourself and come to a realization, a moment of clarity, if you will, on what are the characteristics that make up who I am. Sit down with somebody else that knows you extremely, extremely well and ask them to identify your 5 best traits.
Right. Yeah.
Ask them to identify what they feel other people like about you the most and what they dislike about you the most. And then you go from there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's hard. Like finding that person's hard. Having that conversation is hard. And actually doing something with the results of that conversation is hard.
And finding someone who's going to be real with you the whole way through. That's a difficulty in itself.
Yeah, I mean, qualities of building a team, you don't have to be good at everything. You have to know what you're good at, be killer at that, identify your weaknesses. And if you're part of a team, figure out, okay, well, who can fill in these weaknesses, right? And how do we put them in a position to do that, right? And that's, corporate, business, team, whatever it may be, that's everywhere. And that goes as well psychologically. Well, okay, well, psychologically, maybe I'm a little bit frigid. I'm a little bit hard in this sense, and maybe I've missed things that a more compassionate person might see. Okay, well, how do I start to learn those traits or put people around me that will have honest conversations and honest dialogue with me so I'm not blindsided by things, right? But again,
sure.
to have that conversation and be like, oh, I'm not the best at everything. You have to have your ego in check a little bit. It goes back to our earlier conversation, right?
For sure, man. It's a testy world, man. It's a testy world, and everybody talks about wanting to achieve a certain level of greatness and wanting to reach certain goals, whether that's financially, whether that's something tangible, a home, or whatever the case may be. But it comes down to, what are you willing to do to get there?
Yeah.
I mean, actually willing to do. How much are you willing to put in? How much of yourself are you willing to? There's a stage where you deteriorate, like you self-deteriorate, because you've exhausted all your resources, both in the bank and in person, and broken relationships, and so on and so forth. And it really comes back to that conversation of ego.
Absolutely,
it really comes back to, like, it's a whirlwind.
It's a whirlwind, and it's a long whirlwind too. Life is long, and you have to stand the test of time in this stuff as well. I want to pivot a little bit because we talked a lot about individual player identity. For the players, for the coaches. We talked a lot about NPH, and I want to talk about the National Preparatory Association and what you're doing there, because again, there's a lot of business people listening as well, and I want to kind of talk about that in a sense of like, well, you built this amazing infrastructure and now you're adding another piece onto it. What is it that you're trying to accomplish with this association, for anyone that's trying to build a body or a governing body, and a national infrastructure? And maybe if you could just explain a little bit more what the ecosystem is in terms of like why it's needed and how this fits in from like a sports perspective, and why it's needed.
For sure. So there's constantly been a battle between, the word elite and
right.
the word prep in Canadian sports, and that changed 4 years ago. With the start of the National Preparatory Association, it was something that was demanded by Canadian teams that wanted a higher level of competition and wanted to do recruiting and wanted to get recruited. Now there are certain areas of the country that have yet to buy in to the fact that there must be an elite level. It's not a pat on the back and everybody gets a ribbon type of environment. It's about championships. It's about ensuring that your entire roster by the end of the year, if they're graduating, they should be on scholarship at some level, whether that's the lowest at the CCAA or JUCO level, whether that is at the USports level, NCAA, NAIA, whatever the case may be.
Right.
But that is the goal at the end of the day of the National Preparatory Association. Our measure of success is how many kids graduate and move on and play at the collegiate level. And so far, we're at over 96% of those kids are heading into that direction. Yeah, so it's 4 years of that.
That's insane.
Thank you. And like it's a dream come true, because again, it goes back to filling voids, and that's how the structure and infrastructure towards Canadian basketball continues to develop. We're not doing anything that is, I don't want to toot my own horn. We're not doing anything groundbreaking. We're simply listening.
Right.
We're listening to what the market needs. We're listening to what the needs of our community is, and we are doing to the best of our ability, providing environments that allow them to be seen, allow them. So whether that's through the live streaming of every single season game, whether that's through the live tweets and the social media platform. It's mass marketing. Like if you look at the NPA pages or the North Pole Hoops pages, and you're like, they're doing this for amateur level basketball.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's insane. It's insane. And some may say, like, these kids may not even deserve it at this point.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, some of them don't, because they've built kind of this like ungrateful approach for it.
Yeah.
But for every single one that does appreciate it, and for every single kid that does go on scholarship, it makes it that much more worth it.
Yeah, totally, man. I think so. Maybe speak a little bit to what is now needed then. How have the coaches kind of approached this? What are the coaches thinking about this? You said it was a need and a void that you guys filled, and I couldn't agree more. From a coaching perspective, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, our ecosystem is very different from the U.S. And we're very much growing. We're coming now, and we're really coming into our own. What's needed from our coaches here in Canada to really truly be a world-class country?
So I think the coaches, it's not on them anymore. I think they've done everything that they possibly can with the little resources that they have. In the U.S., it's a lot different. You have alumni who are coming back to the program, and they're donating, $500,000.
Right.
You have a full-time staff of athletic therapy, trainers, strength and conditioning, nutrition plans, so on and so forth. And then you have other places who are just making ends meet, essentially.
Yeah.
So the coaches are doing everything in their power. It's more so the infrastructure and the need for truly like preparatory colleges, private schools to invest back into their programs. And we mentioned this a little bit earlier. All of that money is being invested into hockey. It's starting to change a little bit. Corporate Canada is starting to wake up and see that this is, in the States, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Absolutely.
In Canada, that's not the case. Not even at the college level here, let alone high school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, long answer short, in terms of high school coaches, I think they're doing more than they possibly can to ensure that their kids are getting the most of their opportunities. But it's a matter of their administration and corporate Canada to wake up a little bit and to invest, and they will see a return on their investment. It's just a 5 to 10 year, progress reports is what you're looking at.
It's truly an investment, is what you're saying.
100%. And you know what? We're just a kind of an insider here. We talked about this on my last visit to Vancouver. We're working on trying to get a Vancouver school into the National Prep Association.
Yeah.
So if you look at it right now, from Calgary, Alberta, all the way to Newfoundland,
yeah,
there are schools present currently competing in the National Prep Association. This is the final dot to connect. And if this happens, you're going to see the community in Vancouver forever grateful to the first mover that takes a chance on this. Because you and I both know the basketball culture in Vancouver is one that is very high and rich and enjoys the game thoroughly. and that's partly why the Olympic qualifiers are coming to Vancouver in June. Now, take that to the prep level. You got every year Vancouver is losing kids to other provinces
every
to
year
go play prep
in
every
states.
single year, and to the U.S. Now, you develop one program where everyone is on board and wants to buy in. What's going to happen is, number one, other schools are going to recognize and they're going to say, hey, you know what? We can have our own conference out here. We have the sustainability and the leadership to have our own conference. And that is essentially what this is going to look like long term. It is going to happen. I don't know whether it's this season coming up or the season after, but it is going to happen. Mark my words, Vancouver will be the last dot to connect coast to coast.
Yes, sir. Maybe you can speak a little bit to, we talked about narratives earlier, and Ontario, the East Coast, and just in general has a different narrative as it comes to basketball and identity and culture out there versus what we have here on the West Coast. Maybe you can talk a little bit to the culture that exists in those two respective areas and what needs to happen in terms of development over here on the West Coast for us to truly hit, a world-class level.
Sure. I think centrally, because we are so close to places like New York and Chicago, and just from a personality standpoint, a gritty culture in the United States, I think that we adopt and borrow from those cultures as well. The fact that we can travel pretty quickly and play against those teams now develops in Canadians traits that they never had, certain levels of toughness and just extreme ferocity that they may not have had prior to. Now, vice versa, on the other side in Vancouver, everything is very spread out. You may have a kid, a kid that's in northern British Columbia that is playing extremely well, but he's never gonna meet with somebody from Delta or close to the border in the United States. And if they don't participate against each other and compete against each other on a regular basis throughout the regular season, then the dude that's up north and the dude that's down south is going to think that they are the best in the province, having not played against each other, having not practiced against each other. So I think, and this goes back to the whole prep conversation, solidifying a team of Vancouver or British Columbia's, never mind Vancouver, British Columbia's top 12 to 14 kids and having them go at it every single day and sharpening iron every single day. That's when you're going to maximize on the potential of the province. That's when your provincial team is going to go to nationals and compete at the level that Quebec does and Ontario does, and Nova Scotia even, which is a much smaller population, much lower in terms of economic status, yet they find ways.
Which is incredible. That's incredible.
For sure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, I hear you, man. Listen, I think economically, that's a lot to do with it, and that's the part that makes me scratch my head, because I'm like, well, the West Coast should be prevalent. We have all the ingredients to be prevalent, and yet we are not prevalent as it pertains to players entering the NCAA or players entering the NBA, which is paramount to the culture and paramount to the success of the sport internationally and nationally. So I think that's a big part. And when we talk about economics, I think what you spoke to earlier in terms of corporate Canada waking up, in terms of seeing that investment and having that investment. It doesn't take much, man. Just look down south. Look at the NCAA. That's a multi-billion-dollar industry. In fact, it's been shaken up a ton. Geez, maybe you can speak to that a little bit in terms of everything that's happening there, in terms of players being paid and amateurism as a whole. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that situation that's evolving down south.
Yeah, the rules are changing pretty significantly now down south, and it shows just how far ahead they are. They're about 50 years ahead as an industry. You have the NBA rules that are about to flip over as well. A little insider. So just as T-Mac, Kobe, LeBron left from high school, that's going to start to happen again.
Wow.
So now the collegiate system is not going to reap the benefits of making oodles of money off of these players and their jerseys, and it's essentially like modern day. I'm going to use a sensitive word here. It's modern day slavery. Man.
Yeah,
it's modern day slavery, and it's terrible. I agree with the fact that kids down south should be paid, to play in college. I don't believe that the scholarship is as great as it's made out to be, especially considering the billions that are made around March Madness, the amount of gambling that goes down, the merchandise that gets sold, the tickets that get sold, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So systematically, they're already changing.
Yo.
Yep.
Man, Wi-Fi keeps dropping. The Wi-Fi can't handle your bandwidth of heat, man. It's insane.
Stop it.
So yeah, listen. So NCAA players need to get paid. I agree. There's a new ecosystem that's evolving in that. Modern day slavery. That's harsh, man. But you know what? I think it's the truth. You can't make money off your own likeness. That's insane. Working without getting paid, essentially, and that is the definition, my friend. Especially when you're so multi-talented, and at the same time, those are your peak earning years. You should be able to earn through your peak earning years.
For sure.
So, we'll see what happens with that ultimately. Man, I got to ask you in closing here, you're doing so much for the culture, so much for the industry, the country, and most importantly, the individuals that are growing up in this ecosystem. What's in it for you? What's the goal, and what has made this so prevalent as, I don't want to say a life's purpose, but something that you've dedicated, coming up 2 decades to? Why is this so important to you, man?
I mean, it goes back to our humble beginnings, and just coming from an immigrant family and trying to make it work in Canada.
Yeah.
And trying to get on scholarship myself at the time, and it not working out simply due to a lack of opportunity. My goal is simply, to ensure that everybody that needs to be recognized, every stone is turned, and every person that is looking to get a Division I scholarship, a USPORT scholarship, gets that. And as we continue to develop the culture in Canadian basketball, working alongside the national team, working alongside NBA teams now, and NCAA clients, I think that it's starting to mold into what we want it to be. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd like to see myself at the NBA level, and I think that it's not far-fetched at all.
Not at all.
We already work with those levels. It's just a matter of transitioning, essentially. I don't know if that's in the immediate future, but as of right now, we have a lot more work to do. I mean, we just finished talking about, Vancouver's. If Canada as a whole is behind the United States, Vancouver is behind the rest of the country. So we have to fix what's going on at home before I can even think of, moving on to the next level.
Yeah, totally, man. So at this point, in your career or in your life, how old are you, my man?
32.
You're 32. So at 32, with a bunch of experience behind you, what's important to you now? How has your thinking grown? How has your consciousness kind of developed, and what's in your head now, and what areas are you trying to grow in, and what's important?
Yeah. I mean, naturally, I think it's about family and starting one myself, but also leaving a legacy. And what I mean by legacy is having people remember you for purpose, for having a vision, having set something that was before you non-existent, and had an impact on thousands upon thousands of people via scholarship opportunities. That's essentially how I'd like to be remembered as I kind of transition through and eventually move into another realm in the sport and in this industry. It's about global impact and empowering the next generation to think on their own. That's the biggest thing. We're on a podcast right now that is required to think.
Yes.
And that is basically it right there. That's
right.
Probably exactly why you have me on. We vibe on that level, and I would like to see the next generation of students and student athletes have an understanding for what it truly means to self-identify and, work with their own brain and make their own decisions.
Yeah. If you do you think that is the core to what your message is now as an individual, like in the world, or what do you think is the core messaging you're trying to throw out to the world now in 2020?
I think it's a story of perseverance. I think that you are not your means. You can get out of any strife, any hardships, any tough spots that you're ever in. I don't think we got to touch on it today, but we come from extremely humble beginnings. Drake says started at the bottom. Well, we started below the bottom, and that is essentially it. I think that only people that are super self-driven, self-motivated, and have a long-term vision are the ones that ultimately gain most success. And I just want to be able to push that message of perseverance and just getting to the next level. There's always another level.
Beautiful, man. If there's, in closing, if there's one book, piece of content, podcast, interview, whatever it may be that has resonated the most with you over the last couple of years, what is it? Where can we point people and why?
Okay. It is actually a non-business book. But for me, it was The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama.
Wow.
And that was presented to me at a time where I was kind of in the gutter. I was in a state of borderline, you could say, depression, in terms of having this running out of this perseverance. And I thought that I had no more in me. And then I read this book and I realized that while you're serving an entire community, sometimes you may not feel appreciated. Sometimes you may not feel like you're getting your just due. But remember why you're doing everything that you're doing, and remember what it truly is to be happy. So The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama, one of the world's greatest figures of all time. That's a no-brainer. That's a
no-brainer. I love it. I love the direction that you went with that, man. I think that's beautiful. At the end of the day, it's about fulfillment. It's about happiness. It's about, impact and legacy, and all of those things are prevalent within that piece. So that's beautiful. Where do you want to direct people in terms of you, in terms of MPH or whatever it may be? If people want to find out more, want to connect with you, where do you want to push them towards?
For sure. So, you can find us on northpolehoops.com for a website, and at North Pole Hoops on our social media streams for basketball fans who are looking to stay in tuned. And then myself at Elias_NPH, ELIAS_NPH.
Awesome, man. I really appreciate your time. I'm so glad we got to connect and actually make this happen. I've been trying and pushing, and you've been pushing, and this is great. So a lot of joy from my end for just having you on, and everything we talked about we'll link to in the show notes on the website. And yeah, man, listen, I'm happy for you, and I'm grateful for what you've done and what you've built, and I'm excited. If there's any mentor or person that these young people can be looking towards, I'm just happy that it's you, man, and I'm happy you've grown into that spotlight and continue to serve the community in that way. I'm just super grateful for these young people, because that didn't exist earlier and now it does. So thank you for your servitude, man. I really do appreciate it.
I truly appreciate your words, man. Those are really kind words, and I thank you as well, number one, for having me on, and for the team, for Kev, for your patience.
Yes, sir.
But also, for you're providing a platform here that forces people to stop and think. So that's hats off to that for sure.
That is the ethos, my friend. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll chop it up soon. And again, make sure you reach out on Instagram, Twitter, website, whatever it may be. And until next time, man, I just look forward to watching your journey.
Peace and love, bro.
Thank you, man.
Legacy, I know. What a way to end that off. I think that's really analogous of what Elias represents as a human, and what he represents in his organizations, and what he tries to build in other people. Thank you so much for coming on, Elias. Absolute pleasure and an honor. I appreciate what you're building out there. For everyone listening, if you know someone in the Toronto area that thinks the way that you do, is trying to broaden their knowledge base across all industries, is really passionately curious, and is actually looking to expand how they're thinking and the people that they're tapped into, and need a tribe to do that. We'd love if you could share this podcast with them or other podcasts. Our back catalog is insane. We've noticed a couple of people out in Toronto really showing us some love, and we want to continue to grow that base out there. We also have a weekly shout out, someone in the community that, no paid promotion, no nothing, just us, giving some love to. And that this week is Steve Rio, someone that we believe is pushing the community forward. Steve actually has a new podcast called Now with Steve Rio that has a lot of parallels to ThinkSpace. The whole premise of the podcast is around what does it mean to live a good life? And I think there's a lot of parallels there. And if you enjoy ThinkSpace, you'll probably enjoy that too. Thank you, Steve, for everything you do for us at Self Hired, for the community in Vancouver. We do appreciate you. On that same note, shout out to Self Hired for producing this beautiful podcast, making my life so easy, just coming in, sitting down, recording, and getting out of here. The production team's insane. If you're looking to produce a podcast, make sure you get at them. The link will be in the show notes, and the link will be in the description as well.